I'm Emily, a 35-year-old full-time homemaker, and I just gave birth to twin siblings, John and Sarah. It took an exhausting 2 days from contractions to delivery, and by the end of it, I felt physically drained. But as soon as I heard their healthy first cries, all my exhaustion vanished. Despite my fatigue, I had to make a tough decision. I was originally supposed to go back to my parents' house, but my mother had been hospitalized for surgery just 1 month before I gave birth. As much as I longed to move back in and have the support, I prioritized a recovery and made the choice to stay in our apartment and adjust to life with newborns. 3 mornings after I brought the twins home, I was trying to catch a few hours of rest when the intercom rang loudly. Who could be at the door so early? I looked through the peephole, and my heart sank. It was my mother-in-law. Why was she here so early? With no time to prepare, I reluctantly opened the door. She barged in without any hesitation, making so much noise that it woke up John, and Sarah followed suit. Just as the babies finally fell asleep after crying for what seemed like hours, she managed to disrupt their brief rest. "Emily, look at this mess," she said, her eyes scanning every corner of the house. "You haven't been slacking on your chores, have you, just because you had babies?" She went on to trace her finger along the windowsills to check for dust. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, barely able to hold myself together from exhaustion, and she was critiquing the cleanliness of my home. I was already struggling with sleep deprivation when my mother-in-law started dictating what I should be doing. She swatted my hands away when I tried to console the crying twins and immediately took over, saying, "I'll take care of them. A sleepless night is no excuse. Don't slack off. Start your chores." As if on cue, she ordered me to get to work. "Why are you feeding them formula?" she questioned. "Any loving mother would breastfeed. What kind of unloving parent are you?" The sting of her words cut through me, as I had been struggling with breastfeeding. Holding back tears, I bit my lip and silently began cleaning the house, trying to ignore her. Despite her claims that she would help with the babies, all she did was casually soothe them when they cried, but as soon as their diapers needed changing, she called me over. I couldn't focus on anything, overwhelmed by the constant juggling of chores and caring for the twins, all while my mother-in-law loitered around, complaining about every little thing. For the next 2 months, my mother-in-law came over almost every day, half-heartedly tending to the twins while bombarding me with complaints. I couldn't even find time to talk to my husband about it. He was always exhausted after long days at work. The stress of managing the household, raising 2 newborns, and dealing with my mother-in-law's constant criticism wore me thin. There was no escape. She criticized the way I held the babies, the way I fed them, and even the way I dressed them. Everything seemed wrong in her eyes. I was drowning in frustration, trying to keep it together for the sake of my children, but it felt like there was no end in sight. I felt more alone than ever. The day finally came when my mother-in-law said she wouldn't be visiting anymore. At first, I felt a sense of relief. Perhaps I would finally have peace. But to my shock, the next day she came to the door with her hand outstretched, demanding payment for 2 months of help with childcare and travel expenses. She expected me to pay her for her assistance. I was dumbfounded. "What are you talking about? I never asked for your help," I snapped. "In fact, your presence here for the last 2 months has been nothing but unpleasant. Please don't come back again." It was hard, but I finally stood up for myself, asserting my boundaries. I knew I couldn't let her continue treating me this way. Standing up to my mother-in-law was one of the hardest things I had to do, but it was also one of the most empowering moments of my life. I realized that I deserved respect and that I needed to prioritize my own well-being, as well as the well-being of my family. It wasn't easy, but I finally felt a sense of peace returning to my home. After the confrontation with my mother-in-law, I knew I had no other choice but to act decisively. I kicked her out of the house, packed her things, and left. I couldn't stay in that toxic environment any longer. I gathered my twins, John and Sarah, and headed back to my childhood home. As I packed up, a wave of guilt washed over me. Was I burdening my mother? She had already been through so much, but there was no way I could have stayed in that house without losing my mind. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law wasted no time in spreading her version of events. She went straight to my father-in-law and my husband, crying that I had spoken to her harshly and was completely unreasonable. She painted herself as the victim, claiming she had only tried to help and was cruelly rejected. When my husband came home that evening and found the apartment empty, he was immediately confused. I could see the worry in his eyes when I explained the situation. His face turned pale as the shock set in. He was angry, no, furious, but it wasn't directed at me. He stormed off to his parents' house, unsure of what he would find there. The next day, my father-in-law called me. I was ready for another confrontation, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Upon hearing my husband's side of the story, my father-in-law's face turned an eerie white. He looked at my mother-in-law, who stood there with her arms crossed, defiantly staring back. "What have you done, dear?" he asked her, his voice shaking with anger. This wasn't the calm, mild-mannered man I had known for years. My father-in-law rarely got angry, but when he did, it was a sight to behold. Even my husband, who had never seen his father so upset, stood there speechless, unsure of how to react. My mother-in-law was flustered. "Why are you so mad? I was just helping her. Why am I the one getting scolded?" I went out of my way to reduce her burden with childcare and even paid for my travel expenses. I did nothing wrong, but my father-in-law wasn't having it. "No, you don't understand, do you?" His voice cracked with emotion. "Do you know who her grandfather is?" My father-in-law continued, trembling with anger. "Do you know who her grandfather is? The scary-looking old man who came to the wedding? That man is the chairman of my company." When my mother-in-law heard those words, her face drained of color. "What?" she gasped, her voice shaking. "You mean the old man from the wedding?" That's when the pieces clicked into place. My grandfather, the one my mother-in-law had been so intimidated by, was the chairman of a major corporation. My wedding had been a grand affair, with several CEOs and influential figures in attendance, but it was my grandpa who was the true power behind the curtain. He was a strict man, demanding of both himself and others, and rarely showed any emotion. But when it came to me, his granddaughter, he was different. He doted on me, taking me out to fancy restaurants, buying me expensive gifts. And when I got married, I later learned from my grandmother that my grandpa had been so happy he cried. With the revelation of my grandfather's status, the stakes were raised. If my mother-in-law's actions reached him, it would be disastrous. But there was more at play here than just family drama. My father-in-law wasn't just angry because of the family conflict. There was another, far more pressing reason for his fury. He was on the cusp of a big promotion at his company, one that would significantly increase his salary and provide him with more influence. But if my grandfather found out about what had happened, it could ruin everything. The promotion was on the line, and my father-in-law knew it. The betrayal he felt toward my mother-in-law wasn't just personal, it was business. "I've worked too hard for this. How could you stir up such a mess?" he raged. "You've jeopardized everything." My husband, having heard his father's angry words, was left speechless. His disappointment in his parents was clear. He walked away from their house, not looking back. When he came to my parents' house, he explained everything. His face was sad, rather than angry. "I can't believe my own parents are like this," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. My parents didn't say anything at first, but then my mom smiled and offered him dinner." "Come on, James," she said gently. "Let's eat. You're welcome to stay here tonight. We've got room, and it's close to your apartment. You can bring a change of clothes." As I sat at the dinner table with my parents, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had stood up for myself, for my children, and for my marriage. My husband was here, apologizing for the mess his family had caused, and together we would start anew. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least it was ours to navigate. I knew that my strength, the love I had for my children, and the support from my own family would carry me through whatever came next. My peace had been disrupted for too long, but now it was finally mine to protect. At first, my husband was hesitant about staying at my parents' house. It was just so different from the world he knew. But after a long, tiring stretch, he decided to settle in for a quiet night, hoping to relax with the twins. It felt good, almost surreal, to finally have some peace. We cuddled with our crying babies, trying to comfort them together. The sight of my husband gently holding them, whispering calming words, was heartwarming. When it came time to sleep, we all piled into bed, John and Sarah nestled between us. I wished we could always have these peaceful moments. But deep down, I knew that peace was temporary. My mother-in-law would not stay silent for long. A part of me feared she might show up suddenly, but I couldn't have predicted just how quickly she would act. The next morning, while my parents were at work, the doorbell rang incessantly. My heart sank. I could feel it in my bones. The inevitable was happening. I peeked at the intercom and my stomach twisted. There she was, my mother-in-law, standing at the door, demanding to see my children. "Open the door. I know you're in there. Give me back my grandchildren," she shouted, banging on the door relentlessly. I could hear the twins crying from the other room, their little voices cutting through the air like a sharp knife. My patience was wearing thin. But just as I was about to head toward the door, I saw someone unexpected step into the frame. My grandfather, calm, composed, and with a look of quiet authority, opened the door. "What do you think you're doing, banging on someone's door like this?" he asked with a stern voice, his gaze fixed on my mother-in-law, who was momentarily speechless. My mother-in-law stood frozen for a moment before shakily asking, "Wait a minute, you can't be the chairman my husband mentioned, can you?" My grandfather, never one to mince words, raised an eyebrow. "Huh? Oh, now I remember. Are you James' mother-in-law?" His voice softened as he realized who she was, but his expression quickly darkened. "I didn't recognize you, because you didn't introduce yourself at the wedding." My mother-in-law had been opposed to our marriage from the start, convinced that she was losing her son to me. She had refused to attend the wedding, and when she did show up, she kept to herself, sulking in the corner. It was no wonder my grandfather didn't remember her. He wasn't one for playing games, and she had barely acknowledged him. As soon as he recognized her, his face turned even more intimidating. My mother-in-law shrank back, suddenly aware of who she was dealing with. I didn't come here to cause trouble," she stammered. "I just came to see the twins. You brought them here without telling me. It's cruel not to let me see them." But even my grandfather wasn't buying it. "Is that so? Yeah, didn't you tell your daughter-in-law earlier to return my grandchildren? Since when did they become your possession?" My mother-in-law flinched at the words. She hadn't expected to be confronted like this. My grandfather's voice hardened. "I see your affection for the twins, but it's not right to neglect their mother, who has just given birth. You forced your way into her home, disrupting her peace. Do you think that's okay?" My mother-in-law's face went pale. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words seemed to stick in her throat. It was clear that she wasn't prepared for this. Her desperation quickly became apparent as she pleaded, "Wait, please, don't tell James. He told me not to come here. I can't let him find out I came here. Please don't tell him." But my grandfather wasn't swayed. "What are you talking about? There's no reason to hide anything, especially if you've done something wrong. Don't worry, I'll be telling James about your visit." With that, he closed the door, leaving her standing there, stunned and speechless. She didn't even try to protest. My grandfather had made his stance clear. Later that day, my father-in-law was summoned to my grandfather's office. He looked uncomfortable as he entered, his usual composed demeanor cracking under the weight of the situation. My grandfather wasted no time. "Your wife's actions are unforgivable," he said bluntly. "But don't think you're blameless. You're so focused on your own interests that you've ignored everything around you, including your family." My father-in-law, realizing the full extent of the damage his wife had caused, lowered his head. "I'm truly sorry. I'll make sure she never does anything like this again." But my grandfather wasn't buying it. "I can't promote someone like you. There's too much dissatisfaction about your work ethic. I won't stand behind someone who neglects their own family." The promotion was taken off the table, and the fallout was immense. When my father-in-law returned home, he confronted his wife, furious. It wasn't long before he packed his bags and slammed divorce papers down on the table. "I can't live like this anymore," he said coldly. With everything falling apart, my mother-in-law was left without a safety net. Her husband, once her financial support, had turned his back on her. Desperate, she turned to my parents' house, banging on the door late at night, screaming for me to give her back her grandchildren. It was 9 p.m., and she was still causing a scene. Unable to endure it any longer, my husband called the police. The authorities arrived and took her away in a squad car. The chaos ended as quickly as it had begun, and peace finally returned to our home. In the following months, my mother-in-law's life spiraled. She became a shadow of her former self, begging my husband to allow her to see the children, but he refused. He couldn't forgive her selfishness. My mother-in-law, cut off from her son and grandchildren, became completely absent-minded, her life unraveling. As the dust settled, my family found the peace we had longed for. We could focus on raising our children without the constant fear of interference. The road had been long, but the sense of relief was unmistakable. We had weathered the storm, and now we could move forward. Though it was regrettable that things had turned out this way, we knew that we were stronger for it. We had each other, and that was enough. Please feel free to comment below if you like this. Remember to like and subscribe for more.